everybody. I am Dr. Grace Lordan from the London School of Economics, and you are listening to bonus content for the podcast Workforce, which I host, which blends behavioral science insights and practical insights to help you understand better what's going on in your workforce. Recently, we had an episode on resilience. If you want to listen to the full episode, please go to the show notes. But if you want to stick right here, I have some really great bonus content to you from Josh Connolly, who is a resilience coach and also one of the most influential mental health influencers in the UK. Here, Josh is talking to us about listening to our body, about how we can become more resilient and how we need to avoid using other things to suppress our mental health struggles. Let's listen to what Josh Connolly has
more
to
than
say.
we do in Western culture, at least. And I think we need much more emotionally available adults around children. And then I do think that they'll develop resilience, right? If they're given the space and the adequate support that they need to do that. That's what I think we lack in schools, by the way. I think we, in recent times, if you look over the last decade, we've removed funding for all of support for young families, schools, and everything that supports young children, So I think that's a huge problem. Yeah, I think that's a huge, if we tackled that issue, then I don't think we would need as much resilience work in adults at all. Yeah.
If you compare things to kind of a decade or 2 decades ago, Josh, it feels, and maybe this is driven by social media, but it feels that there is an increase in awareness around resilience and also an increase in demand for people to wanting to learn life skills that would allow them to become more resilient. And I'm wondering if you think that's because life is more stressful or people are just becoming more self-aware in recent times as compared to the past.
Yeah, again, it's a very nuanced conversation. I would probably lean towards people are becoming more aware. The conversation has sort of really grown now. I do think there's problematic elements to that, in that sometimes I think sort of natural human responses are now sometimes labeled as a negative. So rather than saying I went through a really difficult time and struggled with what I was experiencing, then we're much more likely to frame it in a way that our mental health was struggling, when actually, if we're experiencing something difficult, then our feelings are likely to be difficult. So I do think that in some ways it's, the conversation has grown and we've told people to start looking within a bit more. And actually, I think a lot of us now are looking within a bit more, but lacking the understanding, tools and support to be able to deal with what we see when we do that.
So you think the labeling of something as a mental health issue when a big stressor does come along can actually be problematic?
Like what I think can be problematic is, let's make up a scenario, struggling relationship at home, struggling to pay the bills because of rising costs, and a child at school going through a difficulty. It would be appropriate, I think, for somebody to feel stress, heightened sense of anxiety, feelings of overwhelm, difficult emotions. That would be appropriate when I would look at it. When we frame it as, I really struggled with my mental health through that period, it's almost like we're saying the fact that we struggled with it was wrong, and we should have been able to go through that experience and not struggle. And I don't think that's correct. I think that takes away, that makes out that we're some sort of machine that can become, that can reach a place where we're not affected by anything. And I think what that drives in the long run is emotional suppression. It tells people that I should be able to be in any situation and be able to deal with it with my head held high and no difficult emotions. And actually, what happens when we do that is, I think we suppress. And so I do think it can be a problem. Yeah.
Can you say anything about the implications of the suppression on the body when we ignore things and pretend that everything is going all right and put on a stiff upper lip? What does that actually do to our bodies?
Well, look, from a like nervous system perspective, right, and a real human way of looking at it, and I often talk to people when I go into organizations about this. I say what a lot of people think they're doing, they say is resilient, is they hold all of their difficult emotions in from the day. So the body goes tense, the breathing goes shallow, they're in that stressed state at work. And I think a lot of people can resonate with then going home and taking it out on the people that we care about the most, be that your partner or your children or your pets or even yourself. I think we hold it tightly in our bodies, and then we tend to redirect it somewhere else rather than finding ways to sort of process and release it in a more healthy way. Now, look, if we store that up even more and we end up going home and our breath stays in that shallow state and we stay very, very tight and clenched in our bodies, the impacts are wide ranging. I know I get headaches. A headache is often a sign to me that I am holding something in, as is, by the way, in my case, a bad back. Yeah, I get sore tops of my back, shoulders, because I'm holding my body so tight all of the time. So I think, the implications on the body is where the conversation needs to go a little bit more, actually, because I think sometimes we over rationalize everything, and to do so, we disconnect from our body, and then we don't listen to the signals from it.
So if we take the mind and the body as separate, which I appreciate that they speak to each other, and if there's somebody who's listening who either wants to become more resilient or is feeling that they have low levels of resilience at the moment, what would you advise them do for their body in order to get rid of some of the symptoms that you described, the tight shoulders, the shallow breathing?
I think there's lots of different exercises, right, that we can do to be able to breathe in and come into our body, right? The most simple one is to breathe in through the nose and elongate the exhale. Now, I don't think it's a maths lesson. People will say in for 4 and out for 7, in for 5, out for 8. I think if you elongate the exhale, you'll find yourself come straight back into your body pretty quickly, actually. And the thing that I often encourage people to do is spend a bit of time noticing what that feels like. Yeah. Noticing that actually when we come into our bodies, we might start to feel some of this tension release from our upper body, maybe from our abdomen, and also be aware, which is true for a lot of people, that can actually in itself bring on a feeling of overwhelm. Yeah. So then that's when I say to people, then we really need to do some more exploring, because if calming my nervous system and calming my body makes me feel overwhelmed in and of itself, right, then there's key signs here. And listen, I really think this is the thing that people avoid, that people actually, what I think a lot of us do, and like you said, you almost can't separate the mind and the body because the body doesn't really do that. But I think sometimes we try to over rationalize everything, and that in itself becomes a way of avoiding our emotions, because we have to disconnect from our body to keep trying to over rationalize stuff. Yeah. And just to say what I'm trying to explain here, over rationalizing can be me going, I shouldn't be upset by this. This is not that big a deal. Stop being worried about it, and trying to frame it nicer in my head, which sometimes I can do, but my body won't match up to that. Yeah. So I need to really, for me, come into my body, and then perhaps if I can allow some of that emotion to move through me.
So for the people who don't become overwhelmed, it sounds like you're trying to bring some mindfulness into this as well. So you do the breathing, and then by asking them to pay attention to what it's doing to the body, it brings you into the present moment.
Yeah. Which is one of the things that we're always trying to do, right? When we're in that stress state and our breath goes shallow and our body goes tight, right? We forget actually this might be, a mixture of loads of other things that are a bit more than the rational brain. So let me just do some of the physical stuff. Let me slow my breathing, release some of that tension. And, like on a micro level, if I've finished work and I'm driving home from work, or I'm thinking about leaving the office if I'm working at home, if I can feel my body's tight and my jaw's clenched, and I may even be thinking to myself, when I get in the house, I'm going to have a discussion with my son, right? And I may be already starting to plan how I'm going to, subconsciously, how I'm going to release this tension in me. And I'm going to do it in a way that's going to upset other people, ultimately upset me. And then I might find myself in bed at night thinking, I've not been very nice to my son again. And then I'm dragging all of that tension into the next day. Whereas if I go, okay, I can feel this, I'm recognizing where I'm going to go with this. Let me take some breaths. Let me breathe, and maybe take it a step further and think, I'm going to take a shower and grab a cup of tea and just allow myself to calm, regulate myself a bit more. Then the likelihood is that discussion that I think that I'm going to have is gone. I won't have that. And then I've released some of that stuff. And the next day I can start with a bit more space in my body to be able to take on something new, Yeah. And these are the kind of small micro changes that can have a huge impact if we're doing them regularly, I think.
And when you were talking about people doing breath work with you, and you said sometimes people can feel overwhelmed. So when you ask them to figure out what it's doing to their body, that they really kind of just push away from it and start over rationalizing. And then you said that then we have to explore a bit more. What did you mean by that? So what's the next phase for people who can't do the basic exercises that you recommend?
So there's a different style of breathing. When we move into like conscious connected breathing, which tends to be a lot more through the mouth, and connected in the way that we breathe, that can bring us a lot more down into our body, a lot more. And to use a term people might understand, almost like fire the system up a little bit, to get our body going again. I'm one of these people, by the way. So calming breathing works to me at a very sort of top level. But if I sit for too long doing calming breathing, it unsettles my body. So some breathing that's a little bit more, pushes me a little bit more, and I do it for a little bit more of a prolonged time, almost seems to override that. And then I get to a place where actually I can be in my body too and release some of that emotion too. Yeah.
And Josh, how did you end up doing this work? So is it something, given what you've just said, that it was to help you ultimately, and then you figured out actually this could help many more people aside from myself?
Yeah, so I've been sober for just over 11 years now. I was 24 when I stopped drinking. Thank you. And what happened was, look, when I stopped drinking, I realized over a process, and I'm looking back in hindsight, of course, but that I'd been toughing it out all my life. I'd been holding everything in. I'd been showing up in that typical, everything's all right, I'm going to keep going. And actually, we don't just tell people to do that. We sort of celebrate it. You know, we celebrate people that have been through really difficult times and seem unaffected by it. And so what I started to work on myself. I had no choice really, because of the ways that I felt. When I removed alcohol, which was my way of dealing with everything, when I sort of took that away, I was left with everything that I felt. And I went through a process over a number of years really of working on myself. And that was a lot of different things, you know, sort of did a lot of sort of group therapy work, and then eventually found things like breath work. And just realized, yeah, that there was a lot here that I could maybe be able to share with other people. And I guess that's how my work sort of evolved and began over the course of those last 11 years.
So the kind of toughening it out that you describe, and alcohol being something that basically was able to mask that over. Are there any other things that people might be doing alongside drinking so much that are masking it being necessary for them to become more resilient and increase their self-awareness?
As in, the question you're asking me, is there other things that people are doing to run away that they're using to mask it other than alcohol? Yeah. Look, without being too sort of broad an answer here, I could say everything. There's literally anything that we're doing to escape and avoid the ways that we feel could, if they start to have a negative impact in the long run, start to have that kind of effect on us, from food, particularly sugary foods, to overworking, to and I'm giving you examples of that I've picked up here in the last 11 years myself, right? And I've had to realize and stop. A classic, very common one that I think you see a lot in society at the moment is calorie counting.
Yeah.
Which again is something that's celebrated for. You know, I've had times when I was taking 2 grains of rice out of my portion to make sure that it was on the right calories, and people will only ever celebrate that as being amazing what you're doing. So, like, I think anything that numbs me out has the potential to become problematic for me if I'm overusing it. Now, I want to caveat that by saying, I think escapism and and perhaps we could even call it numbing out to a degree. We all kind of need. I think everybody needs a break from the world, right? And I think the difference is if I'm consciously saying I've had a really difficult couple of days, I'm going to do this evening, with the knowing that actually what I'm doing is consciously making the decision to do some escapism. That's great. Whether that is a social drink or that is going out on my bike for 3 hours, I think it's great. If I'm doing it every single night, telling everybody I'm absolutely fine, I just love doing this other thing, or it's not a problem, or I'm becoming secretive about it, or it's starting to feel like there's a bit of a lack of control, then I do think anything that we do can start to become problematic in that way. And that's why self-awareness becomes really, really important.
So do you meet people and when you work with them, they realize, oh my God, I was gaming too much to escape, or I was working too much, or I was drinking too much to escape. And they didn't come to you with that problem. They came to you knowing that something is off, but they didn't realize that they were using these escape routes. Or is it usually that somebody has identified an escape route as a problem and they're trying to come out of it, of overusing it?
I get a lot of people when that are using escapism and recognize that they're doing it to avoid, but haven't yet been able to sort of even comprehend what that might be. But actually, I guess in the personal work that I do, I get a lot of people that have tried to stop doing whatever it is and can't deal with what's left. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big missing pieces, I think, of a lot of the kind of discussions is when I stopped drinking, I thought my problems would go away. And very quickly, what I realized is that when I stopped drinking, I was left with my problems, right? And some of the thoughts, feelings, and even behaviors that I might once have said, well, that's because I drink. When they started creeping back in, that's when it became a real problem, because it was like, okay, alcohol and the way that my relationship with alcohol actually, though problematic in the end, wasn't my problem. It was more actually of an attempt at a solution. And so now I've taken that solution away because it doesn't work. What am I left with and what do I do? And I'd go so far as to say over the last 11 years, even some of the sort of healing modalities that I've picked up and used, I've had to, after a time, go, okay, we're just doing this all of the time now. What are we running away from here? So let's put this down for a moment and then go and maybe look at that. So, and I think that, you know, my truth is that happens regularly. And I think that's true for a lot of people as well.
So a lot of the examples that we've spoken about have been current examples of things that might be impacting people that would cause them to reach for some escapism. And I'm wondering then about past experiences. So when you were younger, things that happen to individuals, if those are the things that can be driving the escapism that you're doing today, and through the work that you do with individuals, how do they come from that realization and then break out of something that has happened to them so long ago?
I think nearly all of our struggles in the present, right, though may have something to do with the present, nearly often always are because we're responding to something that happened in the past. Yeah. So I think that's like in some ways, that's like a lifetime's process of gently realizing some of this stuff. I think the first part of that process is to gently be able to explore some of that stuff. We live in a culture that tells us that family is everything and we must never even speak down about anybody within the family, right? And so to be able to start to go, well, maybe my dad didn't show up quite right here, or maybe my mum didn't show, can feel in itself just to acknowledge the ultimate act of betrayal, right? Which in not necessarily in all cases are we even down talking our parents, right? We're just looking at a situation sort of free from judgment and recognizing the impact. So that's like the first part of it. And then it's a shame that the kind of realization and the knowing of that stuff wasn't enough to change it. Because if it was, I think the work would be something that we could reach an end in. I think then the process is about just gently peeling back the layers when we feel ready, right? Gently starting to go, okay, I'm still reacting. And I believe a lot of our adult struggles are because we're still showing up like we're a defenseless child to an adult world as an adult. And so I need to start to realize, okay, let me try and do some work around this. And just gently working with all of that, you know, and finding different ways and modalities to do that. And what I think is great is that there's a plethora of different modalities out there to try, and everybody's different. You know, it's a little bit like the kind of, if you look at like physical fitness, there's 1,000,001 different ways for us to get into shape. We just got to find the one that works for us. And, you know, once upon a time, it was running for me. And then I discovered the bike and started using the bike, and then I'll change and I'll go back to running. Right. So it's kind of just, I think it's similar when we look at the modalities, because I think anytime anybody thinks that they've reached a place where they have it all figured out, it's normally followed by a bit of a fall. And then it's like, wow, how am I back here again? And what am I going to do about it? You know?
And do you get to recognize that cycle as you do this? If you invest in self-awareness, do you recognize when you're feeling great, okay, there's going to be a downward spiral and I need to get ready for it? Or will ego always keep you up on the high so that you experience it over and over?
I think it's a mixture. Yeah, I definitely, if I look at my own experience, there's definitely a knowing now. Enjoy this moment because this feels great. Let's enjoy it.
Yeah.
But similarly, when you're in the down moments as well, right? There is still a lingering. This is the one that I'm not getting out of. I've messed up here, and I'm not getting out of this one, right? And so, like, you always in that moment feel like, I still have it now, right? I think, God, I can't believe I was so down. Like, I'm holding on to this one, and I'm gonna roll with it, and life's amazing. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, I'm back here again. How am I back here? But I ultimately, and I think I think if you look over any sort of spiritual text of, going back to the beginning of time, similar with philosophers and all of that stuff, yeah, all of them say things like, life is pain, life is suffering, and like they talk about the ebbs and the flows, right? And like I do think that that's part of the human experience, and I do think that sometimes in today's life, our attempt to make sense of things, we make out like we're robots with different oils and chemicals going around us, and as long as we know what they all are, we can be in charge of them, and we'll be like a well-oiled machine, and life will be all right. I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever really got anywhere close to that yet. So because I and would I really want to? Maybe when I'm in the down times, maybe the answer to that question is yes. But when I'm feeling like I am today, no, the joys of life and being a human really is what it's all about.